Everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. We are going to get started. One second. Okay. Great to see you all virtually. Great to see your names popping up on the list of participants. We're over 20 now, so thanks so much for joining. My name is Delegate Brooke Learman, and I represent with my teammates Bill Ferguson, Robin Lewis, and Lou Clippinger, the 46th District in Baltimore City. Of course, we work at the state level to pass and implement policies that help make the lives of all Marylanders better. You know, it's interesting. I have really long believed that being a delegate is more than about passing bills in Annapolis. It's about connecting people to the resources that they need. And if government is about reducing barriers to success and creating opportunity, of course, keeping residents safe, then, you know, that is what this webinar today is about. So as we find ourselves in the midst of the greatest public health crisis in over 100 years, you know, everybody is really hurting in some way. No one can claim to be unaffected, but as often happens, unfortunately, we know that those who are facing challenges before are feeling this economic shutdown even more acutely, but many, many other people are feeling this economic shutdown and so acutely, and it's such a huge challenge for all. So the federal and state governments have passed some measures to help. And I want you all to make sure, I want to make sure that you and others know what those measures are and how to access the help you need. So my job today is to help be a bridge between all of you and the experts. So I am hosting several webinars over the next couple weeks that will be chock full of information about what's going on and resources that you can use. We'll also be taping these and putting them on YouTube so that folks can view them at a later date. I am so pleased today for the first webinar that I'm hosting to be joined by Michelle Medeo, a senior attorney at the Homeless Persons Representation Project, and Francesca Baptiste, there on the screen from the Maryland Cash Campaign. Before we begin, I just want to talk a little bit about where we are as we find ourselves here today. So we're gonna do a quick introduction, then we're gonna have some presentations, and then I'm going to go through some of the questions that you all sent in. So thank you for sending in those questions. So before we begin, I just want to provide a quick recap of where we are today. We've seen 3 new federal laws be passed in very quick succession focused on the COVID-19 relief efforts. HR 6074, the Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriations Act, which provided emergency funding for federal agencies to respond to the outbreak. HR 6201, which was the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act that established paid leave, enhanced unemployment insurance, expanded food security initiatives, and increased federal Medicaid funding. And then most recently, HR 748, the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And that was just enacted last week and includes direct payments to Americans, an aggressive expansion of unemployment insurance, and billions of dollars in aid to large and small businesses, and of course, a new wave of significant funding for the healthcare industry, and near and dear to my heart, transit, funding for transit as well. And that is going to mean about $4 billion in resources and aid coming to Maryland for FEMA, for SNAP, for food stamps, for our local school districts, for childcare, public housing, energy assistance, for community health centers, senior nutrition, for Head Start and WIC, and for election security. In addition, most Marylanders who make less than $75,000 will receive direct assistance through recovery rebates, mostly through direct deposit or through the mail. And at the state level, of course, the governor has been acting very aggressively and progressively to issue many executive orders, including over just the last week, the stay-at-home directive, closure of all non-essential businesses, expansion of telehealth services, protection of services for Marylanders with disabilities, and a prohibition on residential evictions and commercial and industrial properties as well. So to discuss what all of these new policies and these many bills and directives mean to you, I'm thrilled to have 2 awesome speakers with me today. They're both leaders working on equity and economic stability in Baltimore. So first we'll hear from Michelle Medeo, senior attorney at HBRP, also a District 46 resident. She's been at HBRP for the last 7 years, where she provides free legal representation in civil legal issues to prevent and end homelessness. And then after, we'll hear from Francesca Baptiste, who's the Director of Tax Partnerships at the Cash Campaign of Maryland. She oversees the Cash Campaign's free tax preparation community partnership and all tax education programs. So thank you so much to both of you for being here today. Here is our agenda. We're going to go through this, and then we will leave it open up for some questions that folks had emailed in previously as well. And I should say that many of those questions have been shared with our speakers today, and they're going to try to address many of those questions during the presentations as well. So thank you both of you so much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. Take it away, Michelle.
Thanks, Delegate Lehrman. Hi, everyone. Michelle Medeo with the Homeless Persons Representation Project. Delegate Lehrman's been such a leader on expanding a lot of the social safety net programs throughout Maryland, and we had some really great successes this past legislative session, which it's hard to celebrate with everything going on, but really appreciate all your leadership and support. Wanted to go through just some of the basic cash and food assistance programs in Maryland. We've been getting a lot of questions lately about if you're currently receiving benefits, what's happening right now. And a lot of folks have lost jobs and really critical sources of income that might qualify you for benefits. So wanted to kind of go through that pretty quickly, but available to answer questions because I know there's a lot of information there. So are you able to bring the slides up?
Yep. There you go. You can see them. We're on the first one.
Let me see. Okay, perfect. Yep, thank you. So these are the most common benefit programs that, the first part, first 5 bullet points that my office, Homeless Persons Representation Project, represents folks in. But I also included, just given what's going on, a couple other slides at the end. So next slide, please. So SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also referred to as food stamps. This is a benefit where you would get on a card money that you can use towards purchasing food at grocery stores, most corner stores, and some farmers markets accept the benefit as well. And it's not intended to pay for all groceries, but it's a supplement to your income. So the amount of benefit you get, they take into consideration other income and expenses that you might have to figure out what money is actually available for you to spend on food. And then the benefit is to cover the rest depending on your household size. And your household, for purposes of this program, is considered to be either yourself or a group of people who live together and customarily purchase and prepare meals together. Next slide. So these are the benefit levels. If you look at the far left column, that's the household size, and the far right column is the maximum benefit level according to each household size. And the Department of Human Services, which is the agency overseeing this program in Maryland, they've announced that for the months of April and May, they're going to issue the maximum benefit for each household size regardless of income, which is really great. So if you typically receive benefits and your benefit is low because you have income and not very much in expenses, your benefit would typically be low, but for the months of at least April and May, you will receive the maximum benefit. And if you don't receive benefits or you've never applied because you think your benefit would have been low, we're recommending folks apply because you're going to be getting, if you're approved, the maximum benefit for the months of April and May. I know a lot of folks who receive Social Security income don't end up applying because the benefit would be the minimum benefit, like $15, depending on your expenses. So if that's either you or someone you know, now would be a good time to apply because you would get the maximum benefit right now. Next slide. So temporary cash assistance is another benefit. This is a cash benefit for folks who have children living with them. So it could be your children, or it could be a grandma caring for her grandkids. And it could be a 1 or 2 parent family. Really the main thing here is it's income based. So you have to have below a certain level of income, and related family related children living with you. Typically there's a work activity requirement, and a requirement that you apply for child support against the non-custodial parent. And if substance use is if there's a screening and it comes up that that's an issue, then there would be a substance use requirement. But these requirements right now are suspended. The department has said, because of everything that's going on, you are not required to do a work program or work in order to receive this benefit. Next slide. And so this is just to give you a sense, the benefit levels according to the household size. So a household size of 1 would be someone who's pregnant, and a household size of 2 is someone, an adult and 1 child, and then it goes up from there. Next slide. So TDAP, Temporary Disability Assistance Program. This is a benefit for, it's a cash benefit for adults who are living without a child. So you can have a child, but if you don't have custody of the child and you're not in the same household, and the main thing here is that you have a disabling condition. Either it has already lasted for 3 months, or it's expected to last for 3 months. And if it's going to last longer than 12 months, you will be required to apply for federal Social Security benefits as a condition of receiving TDAP. And because it's a cash benefit, you really can't have other income. If you do, it's like a dollar for dollar reduction. So it would have to be less than $215 a month. And the department has said that right now, just with everything going on, if you apply for benefits, you will have 90 days to provide verification that or documentation that might be needed to prove that you're eligible. So for TDAP, you would typically need to get a form completed by a health provider confirming that you do have a disabling condition. But just to expedite things, you would have 90 days. So your application would probably be decided much sooner, and you would have an extension of time than you typically would. Medicaid or medical assistance, health insurance is another benefit folks might qualify for. A lot of folks I know got health insurance probably through their employers. So you would go to marylandhealthconnection.gov. And this is where you could apply for any number of the, healthcare subsidies, or if you qualify. The chart I have up here is the monthly income limits for Medicaid. And this one goes by household size as well. Next slide. So the benefits I just talked about are all administered through the state agency is called the Maryland Department of Human Services, and that state agency administers it through local Department of Social Service offices, or DSS. So just a few policy changes. All local DSS offices right now are closed to the public until further notice. The phone number on here is for the customer service center. There are staff who are answering these calls. There might be some delays due to less staff working, but the phone is being answered. They've announced a 6-month extension on all redeterminations. So a redetermination is like when you apply for benefits, you're only certified for either 6 or 12 months. And before the end of that certification period, you would need to usually go in person or by phone, have another meeting where you reestablish eligibility. So they've announced that there's 6 months extensions on all of the redeterminations for the programs I just mentioned. And we have seen a number of folks who still got letters saying that they have a redetermination due. These, I think it's safe to say you can disregard those notices because they usually say go in person to recertify, but the offices are closed. I understand that notices should be going out with a new redetermination date. But if you did get a notice that says your redetermination is coming up and you have to go in person, you can call the call center, but I think those are probably outdated, old notices, and you can just disregard them. If anyone, of course, if your benefits do stop, you're welcome to call my office. We represent folks for free in different kinds of application denial cases and terminations. There's no benefits no benefits should be terminated in March or April for any reason. That's what the department has told us. And that you do not need to attend work or a work activity program in March, April, May, or June in order to receive benefits. Next slide. So they are still accepting applications, even though the offices are closed. So if you can apply online, would definitely recommend doing that. This is the website. For all the benefits except TDAP, you would get, once you get approved, you get benefits dating back to the date you apply. So the sooner you apply, the better. For TDAP, you get it for the whole month, regardless of when you applied. So they are prioritizing applications right now, they said, with their staff. They're working to process them. I think they have still up to 30 days to make a decision, but they've taken some measures to try to speed up the process. Like typically there's a telephone interview, but they're trying to waive that in as many cases as they can, unless there's something they really need to verify from the application. There's no in-person meetings right now. If the department needs something else from you that wasn't in the application, it would give you a call. And as I mentioned earlier, you would have 90 days from the date you apply to submit any documentation that the department needs. So let's say they need from you proof that you are no longer working. If that's something that you can't get, you can ask them to help you out. If that's something that just doesn't exist, maybe your HR department closed down, you can ask them to accept your oral statement as the proof. If you've received a sanction in the past for your TCA, you can still file a new application and the sanction would not prevent you from being approved. Next slide. So for all those cases, if there's any decision made that you disagree with, you would have the right to file an appeal. Right now, they are accepting appeals by phone. So you would just call and let them know you want to file an appeal, make note of who you spoke with and the date and time. If they give you a confirmation number, write that down as well. You can also, if you have access to a printer, you can also print the hearing form and mail it to the Office of Administrative Hearings, OAH. OAH is the agency, they're independent from DSS, and they're the agency that administers administers the hearings. So it's good that it's separate from DSS because you would go before an administrative law judge, not the same agency that made the decision to deny or terminate you. But they're not accepting, they're accepting appeals, but there's not hearings until after May right now. Moving along to different programs, Social Security, this is through the Social Security Administration. There's no in-person meetings right now. The updates here on the on the Social Security website say that they're not conducting medical disability reviews, they're not processing and collecting overpayments at this time. But you still can reach them by phone. Next slide. So as Delegate Lehrman mentioned, there's some legislation that came out expanding some of the unemployment insurance protections. I just put some of the, a few of the new changes on here. So regular unemployment insurance through the state is typically 26 weeks in Maryland. You would apply through the DLLR website. on here. There's a supplement to the uninsurance employment benefit. So on top of the usual benefit, there is $600 per week. And on top of that, there's an additional 13 weeks of state unemployment insurance benefits that would kick in after the regular state UI benefits are exhausted. And
Michelle,
yeah,
I think that's a really big deal. And I want to make sure people really hear that. I mean, some folks in the past might not have thought it was worth it to try to file for unemployment. They didn't think they would get enough. But with this new federal money coming in and the extra $600 per week, which is, automatically updated and everybody gets it, that's a lot of money, and it's really worth it to struggle through the, the having to call in several times because of disconnected calls and whatnot, I think. So just wanted to really emphasize how important that is.
Definitely. And it's probably taking them a lot longer than usual to process these applications because of the high demand right now. But, just make a note of if you apply, the date you applied, and if they give you a confirmation number or anything like that, keep track of that in case you need to follow up. And then the last bullet point on here is a benefit for folks who might not usually be eligible for regular unemployment insurance. Like independent contractors. So there's still, they issued guidance on this, I think this morning or yesterday. So we're still learning more about this. And right now there's no way to apply. They're still getting the application process up and running. I think if you apply right now, you'll get denied just because they haven't figured out the application process. So stay tuned on that if you're not eligible for unemployment insurance, because there's more to come on that. And there's a great FAQ on all these benefits that another organization put out that I can send you after with a lot more detailed information. Next slide.
Great.
Okay, great. So some common housing questions that our office has been receiving. We've gotten a lot of questions about whether if you can't pay rent right now, if the landlord can evict you during the COVID-19 crisis. The answer is no. The court has placed a hold on all residential eviction orders, residential eviction cases, foreclosure cases, and tax sale foreclosure cases statewide. So any new or open cases are pretty much on hold right now. If you're unable to pay rent next month due to COVID-19, your landlord could technically still file an eviction case, but the court would not hear it. And there's some more information there. The federal government has stopped landlords in certain properties from even filing new eviction cases or collecting charging fees related to non-payment of rent. But, it's kind of complicated to explain. So we came up with a flow chart. I don't know if that's more confusing or helpful, but it depends on the funding or whether your property is subsidized or private and when the eviction was filed. And but if folks have specific questions about your particular circumstances, rather than answering them in the webinar where everyone's here, we would encourage you to contact our office and we can provide more specific information to you. Next slide. So just in the interest of time, I'll keep it there. This is our contact information. Even though our office is physically not open, we are all working remotely and would be happy to get in touch with you and answer specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. There was one question that came in about whether any of this is available to people who are undocumented. And I know you covered some of the questions that folks had sent in as well. I don't know if you want to take, 1 minute to talk about, what services, what you just talked about, it covered, are available to undocumented people. I know not many, because many of them are federal, so that's unfortunate. But if you want to, I don't know if you want to take 1 minute to just chat about that.
Sure. So yeah, unfortunately with, SNAP and TANF, TCA. These benefits are federal money given to states to administer. So there are some federal restrictions, and you know, for SNAP, if the children have, if you have children and children have some sort of immigration status that would qualify you to receive benefits, you can have a household where some folks, like let's say the parents, are not part of the household, but you do receive benefits because there are children with immigration status eligible, either citizenship or other qualifying statuses. And I would be happy to, you know, it goes program by program, but I'd be happy to provide some individual information if folks want to contact us. You know, it doesn't, for us, for HPRP, it doesn't matter your immigration status. We speak with anyone regardless, and everything you share with us would be confidential. And we can provide, you know, legal advice or information specific to your family. One other thing I just thought of that I forgot to mention is the department is going to be issuing, it's like, I think it's called PEBT, pandemic EBT. So this would be for folks who have children who are, you know, when you're not in school receiving those free or reduced meals, that's an extra financial burden on the family to provide extra meals and food. And there was a federal option that Maryland applied for to be able to issue more on the food stamp benefit card to families who have school-aged children and are not in school right now, of course.
Right. And we did apply for that, and the last I checked, we had not been given the go-ahead yet, but I know that Maryland did send in its application late last week. So hopefully that will come forward as well. Okay, we want to move along. Thank you so much, Michelle. That was really informative. Thanks so much. I want to move on to Francesca and the cash campaign. I know there are a few questions about tax prep that were sent in. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Francesca.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Delegate Lerman, and for pulling this together. And Michelle, what a great presentation. I know that's a lot of information that folks are really looking for right now. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Francesca Jean-Baptiste, and I am the Director of Tax Partnerships with the Cash Campaign of Maryland. If you haven't heard of us before, the CASH in our name stands for Creating Assets, Savings, and Hope. And we're a nonprofit that works to promote the economic advancement of low to moderate income individuals and families in Baltimore and Maryland. So today I want to talk to you about the economic stimulus payments that will be sent as part to American taxpayers in the wake of the COVID-19 outbreak. But, you know, just before we get started, I really want to reiterate to you that all this information is rapidly evolving. So what is in this presentation is what we had available through Sunday at 12:15 p.m. And what I'm going to talk about is what was available as of 1:50 p.m. today. So I just want you to take all of that into consideration throughout this discussion. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief and Economic Security, or CARES Act, was signed into legislation on March 27th. And under Internal Revenue Code 6428, the Treasury and IRS are directed to make recovery rebates to individuals and families. Next slide, please. So what are these economic impact payments? So it's just another word for stimulus checks, and this recovery rebate basically functions as a credit for taxpayers against their 2020 income taxes, and it's paid in advance as a way to ease the economic burden faced by individuals and families during this pandemic. So this means that when you prepare your 2020 tax return, there will be a line to include the 6428 credit. The credit on your 2020 return is going to be reduced by anything that you've received in advance. And if there is a difference, there is that part will be a portion of your 2020 refund. But if you have been overpaid by receiving the stimulus check, you're not going to be required to return any of the excess amount, and this payment is not considered as taxable income. Next slide, please. So who is eligible? So any individual who is a U.S. citizen, national, or resident alien is eligible to receive this payment. Unfortunately, this means that you do need to have a valid Social Security number in order to receive these payments. You cannot be claimed as a dependent on someone else's return. So I know that we've been getting a lot of questions about college students and things like that. I'm going to cover dependents on the next page, but you can't be claimed as a dependent by someone else. And there is an income threshold. So you'll get the maximum benefit if your income is up to $75,000 as an individual and up to $150,000 as a married couple filing jointly. But then the payment will phase out for individuals that are over a certain amount of income. So if you're a single filer and you have income that's over $99,000, you're not going to receive any payment at all. Or if you're a married couple filing jointly and you earn over $198,000, you're not going to receive a payment either. So in the in-between, there's going to be a phase out that I'm going to discuss in a little bit. Next slide, please. So for eligibility for dependents, there are going to be rules, and those are the child tax credit eligibility rules. So it has to be a child that's age 16 or younger. So again, talking about those college students that can be claimed as dependents on their parents' tax returns. There isn't going to be a portion of a check that's coming for those folks. You have to be 16 or younger, lived with the taxpayer for more than half of the year, and not have provided more than half of your own support. Next slide, please. So how much is it? Okay, I know I should have led with that because that is the million-dollar question that everybody wants to know, but I wanted to make sure you heard me as I talked about eligibility. But the stimulus payment will be $1,200 for each adult tax filer, or $2,400 if it's a couple filing jointly, and then it's going to be $500 for each child that is on the tax return. It's important to know that if you're if you're a single filer in that $75,000 to $99,000 income, there's going to be a phase out. So once you hit that peak maximum $75,000, the credit is going to get reduced by $5 for every $100 that you earn. So I know that's a pretty crazy calculation, but the good news is, next slide. For most people, it's going to be automatic. There's going to be no action required. So you don't have to do anything. The IRS is automatically going to calculate this information for you and send you your payments. Next slide, please. So that was easy. As I said, it's going to be automatic for most. I know, I love this button. Our program associate, Megan, who put these slides together, is always amazing at finding these fun little things. We like to jazz up our presentations. Anyway, the IRS will use information from the 2019 tax return. So that's the first point that they're going to be looking at to figure out what the adjusted gross income is. And so adjusted gross income is going to be your total income minus any adjustments. If there isn't a 2019 tax return on file, then they'll look to your 2018 tax return to determine your AGI and then the amount of your credit. Next slide, please. So most payments are going to be direct deposited into the same banking account that is reflected on the latest return that's filed, so either 2019 or 2018 return. Next slide, please. But what if the IRS doesn't have my direct deposit info? This is the question. This is like the million-dollar question.
Yeah, we had a few people write in the same question. What do they do?
Yeah.
How do they get to us?
How do I get it? So if the IRS doesn't have your direct deposit info, the word on the street from Treasury is that in coming weeks, they are going to be developing a web-based portal for individuals to provide their banking information online so that folks can update it, because, there are folks that have filed their tax return, but maybe they want to, put it in another bank account, or maybe they didn't get a refund, they owe taxes. So there is going to be a web-based portal that is going to allow folks to update their bank account information. Unfortunately, we don't have any more information on that, what that's going to look like or when it's going to be released, but we know that it is supposedly coming. So more on that. Next slide, please. And so what if I'm not required to file a return? So the good news is that Treasury announced that Social Security recipients who are not required to file a tax return do not need to take any action. So if you are receiving payments from Social Security, railroad benefits, Social Security disability, they're going to use your information from the Social Security Administration and will direct deposit your stimulus payment right into the account that they usually deposit your other benefits. Next slide, please. So what is the timeline for this? Oh, actually, wait, one more thing I wanted to say. So for folks that are SSI recipients, because I know that we had a question about that, there has been a call to Treasury to make those payments automatic as well, because they have the recipient information, but it's our hope that that is going to happen. But for other folks that just don't have a filing requirement, so if you get temporary disability assistance or TDAP, as Michelle talked about earlier, or temporary cash assistance, the idea is that Treasury will hopefully create a simple return program to be filed, but we don't have any more information on that. There has definitely been calls, again, to Treasury to try and ease that burden, just because even with filing a simple return, that can create some barriers for folks to get their taxes filed, as a lot of folks are staying at home and don't have access to the internet and reliable internet connection. So hopefully we'll have more information on that to come. But right now, as it stands, folks right now will need to file a simple return if they don't have a filing requirement just yet. Next slide, please. Okay, so the timeline. So the IRS has said that they will begin to issue electronic payments as early as April 9th, with folks receiving the first payments on April 14th. And then the IRS will begin issuing paper checks on April 24th using a staggered system to send out these payments, focusing on the lower income folks receiving those checks first. So if folks that are earning under $10,000 are going to be in that first wave of checks that are being cut on April 24th. The last group of people to get paid by paper checks will be in September, unfortunately, and this is going to include the folks for whom the IRS has no prior tax information for. So the urge is really to try and get, if you have a filing requirement, to make sure that you are filing either your 2018 or 2019 tax return. And then once there's information released about this web portal, that you're uploading your direct deposit information, because Treasury has said that obviously folks that have direct deposit information on file are going to get their payments first. Next slide.
There was a question about whether you will receive a stimulus check if you owe the state or federal government any money. Any ideas on that?
Yes, so the IRS has said that this money is not going to be treated as regular tax refunds. So usually where your tax refunds are up for grabs for any outstanding state or federal debt and can be garnished against that, these are going to be treated separately than that. So you shouldn't be, so those, if you owe taxes or have outstanding debts, that money should not be up for grabs for that.
That's great. And what if somebody else asked, if they use a tax prep service to file their return, will the government still be able to use the information for direct deposit?
Yes, as long as you have as long as your direct deposit information is correct, you should be getting your statements, your stimulus payment there. Another good thing is that the IRS did decide to, Treasury did allow the IRS to extend the filing deadline. So now taxes are not due April 15th, which is, good because that's days from now. But now is July 15th. But these stimulus payments are actually going to be available through December 31st, 2020, just to give people time to get all of their stuff together in case, as companies shut down, some documents might not be available. It takes a little bit longer for folks to get all their things together. So the payments are available through December 31st.
Have you heard any about when the link for the simple return will be made available through the IRS? No.
Yeah, unfortunately, no. We've been right before I got on here. That's what I was doing. Before I went to adjust my makeup, I went to go.
Well, I'm doing a webinar with Congressman Sarbanes on Wednesday, so if it's not up by then, we'll ask him too.
That is seriously what people want to know about. There are a lot of folks who need to have that information, the banking information updated, and need to, just don't have a filing requirement. And those are the folks that need it the most, right? So hopefully that information will be available to us soon. Just, right now we don't have any more info on that. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a few tips to make the most of the economic impact payments. Next slide. I know that we are a little pressed for time, and so I have a few more slides, but I just want to say, please watch out for economic relief payment scams. As we're all stuck at home, some of us are working, but other folks are thinking on how they can scam you for your money. So for example, this first slide is a fake economic impact check from Florida that a resident received that was actually from a car dealership. So,
jeez.
yeah, it's pretty bad. And if you click to the next slide, this is actually one that we found in Maryland. So just, really be careful. The IRS is operating at kind of limited capacity right now. They're, basically they have not all of their employees were set up to work from home. So they have still been working through all of that. So they're operating at a reduced capacity. So if anyone calls you or texts you or sends you a Facebook message, it is definitely not the IRS. They do not have the time, ability, or capacity to do any of that. They prefer to do a lot of their work through paper. But even then, as you can see, that was a paper check that was mailed. So just be really, really careful and think about where, how people are asking you for things and about what, because people are definitely out there ready to scam. So I'll just pause right there just so that we can have some time for questions.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'm going to push us through to the final page. Let's see. Lots here. Oh, well, maybe I'll through to the due dates. Do you want to just go over the quick due dates for folks and then we'll turn it over?
Yeah. So just so folks know, the due dates, as I said earlier, is that for your tax returns, both Maryland and federal are not due until July 15th. And if you even need additional time, you can request an extension so that your tax return isn't due until October 15th if you file for an extension. Also know that business-related tax returns and payments are not being collected in March, April, or May for the comptroller. So just keep in mind that a lot of these dates have been extended. Also, if you're a self-employed individual, the first payment that was due for payroll for self-employment taxes has actually been extended as well. That payment would have been due April 15th for the first quarter, and that's actually been pushed back.
Great, thank you. That is helpful. So we had a couple questions come through that we got to. There were a couple that we missed, I think. One was, if you filed your tax form and are receiving a refund, will you still receive the stimulus check? I believe that's a yes, but yes, okay.
Yeah, that is a yes,
and then,
even if you get a refund.
Even if you get a refund, great. And then there was a question about child support and whether if you are being garnished for child support, what will happen? Will you still get this, or will this go to who you owe money to?
Yeah, so I do believe that child support is one that that I believe will not again be affected because of federal and state debts. But child support is always tough because that's the one that they usually try to get no matter what, just because, it's for child support. But I am quickly checking in the last webinar that I was on to see if that is true, and I will have to get back to you on that.
That's totally fine. No worries. And then there was one question sent in, how will a possible job loss due to COVID-19 impact reapplication for the EID program, since that requires having a job?
So I assume that's for the EITC program,
EITC,
which is the Earned Income Tax Credit, because that does require having a job. I hope that is correct. I don't know of the EID program, but I assume that we're talking about the Earned Income Tax Credit. And it's unfortunate, but the Earned Income Tax Credit is a credit for people who work but don't have very high income. So a reduction in earned income will mean a reduction in the earned income tax credit, because unemployment insurance, unfortunately, is not considered earned income. But if you did manage, to work a couple of months during the year, if you were able to work during, from January through March before all of this stuff hit, and hopefully, fingers crossed, all of this stuff goes away and we're ready to get back to some sense of normalcy and you're able to start working. There isn't, it isn't like you're not going to get any. They're going to give you credit for how much you have worked and been contributing to work.
Right. And then another question was, could you please provide some guidance to those of us working with vulnerable populations who may not typically file taxes and lack access to internet resources for tax preparation? Where should we steer them now?
Yeah, so that's really tough. We have definitely been racking our brains around that because, our facilities have been shut down, our operations have been shut down.
Yeah.
This is a big time for us. We're usually cranking out returns. We serve about 25,000 people in the state of Maryland alone, and we've been shut down for 2 weeks, and most of our counterparts across the country are as well. So it's really tough because right now, the internet is really the only place where you can get access to that information. It's the only place where we can get folks, it's the only way they're going to be able to enter their bank account information if if they don't have a filing requirement. I know that there are some cable, like Comcast is offering free cable, and a lot of places are rather internet instead of cable, sorry, internet. So there are definitely some avenues where folks might be able to access these benefits, but we really, unfortunately, in this day and age when we can't help service people face to face, online is the only thing that we can do. We're definitely making sure that our website is updated and has all of the information, but internet is really where folks need to be able to put that information.
Right.
For it.
Yeah, that's so hard. So there were a few questions about the virus itself and how it's spreading and whether people can be tested. And I wanted to let folks know that although Francesca and Michelle and I are reading a lot about viruses these days, we are not people to answer those questions, but I will be having a guest on the 15th, on April 15th at 2 p.m., Dr. Bob Gallo, who is the founder of the Institute for Human Virology and co-discoverer of the AIDS, HIV, will be joining me to talk about vaccines and viruses and what all of this looks like from his perspective. So just because there were a few questions about that, I want to make sure you don't think we're ignoring you, just that we're not the folks to answer those questions. Michelle, did you want to add anything before we break here?
No, that's great. And we can send out like the chart and some more resources I'll send you after we can send out to folks who participated.
That's great. Yeah, we will definitely do that. So we have a great chart from Michelle and HPRP on eviction. And I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you, Michelle, Francesca, thank you so much for all the work you're doing. I know you are very busy these days, so thank you for taking time to talk with everybody online. And as I said, this will be recorded so that people can view it and share it online, and we'll be sending out the materials as well. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. Hope you'll join me on Wednesday when I talk with Congressman John Sarbanes to get his perspective and to ask him to answer some questions about what the federal government's doing in its role. But thanks again. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us, and stay safe out there and take care and keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.